Okay, folks, we're just going to start in just a moment. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Stephen Holliday. I'm the chair of the Service Excellence Committee. The clerk has advised me that we have quorum, so I'd now like to call our meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room number 2. The meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, and I say good morning to Councillor Perks online, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you're registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. We do have a speaker. I will call speakers in the order that they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Service Excellence Committee page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at svexc@toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. Seeing none, we will proceed. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on March 19th, 2024? Moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor, and that is carried. And now we can begin our agenda. There are 2 items on today's agenda. The first item is SE 3.1, Citywide Service Promise Refresh Initiative Update. I believe we have a presentation on that, so that'll be held. And SE 3.2, 311, Toronto Framework for Reporting and Dashboards. That item, I believe, also has something to go up on the screen, and we also do have a speaker, so that will be held. Very good. So on to the top. The first item is SE 3.1, Citywide Service Promise Refresh Initiative Update. Mr. York, at your pleasure.
Thank you for your time. I really want to welcome Rupi and also my colleagues here from the other divisions, from Solid Waste, Toronto Water, MLS, Parks and Forestry, and so forth, and transportation as well. What's really important is that when we talk about the Citywide Service Promise and the refresh of the Service Promise, it's a commitment around cultural transformation and a commitment to service. Service amongst our organization internally, as well as service to the public and to our councillors. So in terms of this presentation, the next few minutes, we're going to talk about what the Service Promise is, some of the benefits, a bit of a background, consultation. This has been just in a crawl, walk, run phase. I've been working on this since last year and implemented it as of July of last year. Then we'll talk about the refreshed promise as well as the phased implementation and next steps. In terms of what the Service Promise is, it's a citywide promise that guides on how city staff would interact with each other as well as members of council, residents, businesses, and visitors and partners. The service standards detail ways in which staff can determine their commitment to how we work together and how the public should receive that particular work product. Together, we simply know this as the Service Promise, a commitment to service, commitment to being decent, professional, and consistent when dealing with members of the public. In terms of the benefits, enhanced consistency, respectful workplace culture, more clarity around collaboration, stronger service experience and consistent service experience, deeper trust and confidence, greater public accountability, and enhanced staff safety. And when we talk about that, this is a very important point. I'll click onto that, which is around the Service User Code of Conduct. What's really essential here is, in the last few years, we've all undergone some interesting interactions internally and with members of the public as well. So we're here to basically serve the public and believe that everyone has the right to be heard, understood, and respected. Our staff also have the right to work in a safe environment, free from harassment, discrimination based upon human rights and anti-discrimination policy. We understand that people become very upset or angry when the matter is not being dealt in the manner in which they anticipated to be done so. Unacceptable behavior includes language or actions that may cause staff to feel afraid, threatened, or abused. This behavior includes comments that are discriminatory or harassing in nature, including racial harassment and sexual harassment. Some of these examples include threats, verbal abuse, derogatory and insulting remarks, rudeness, profanity, and yelling. What's really important is that we're not just sit there and not manage the interaction with the public. We're going to do so in a consistent, fair, and respectful manner. And when these issues do arise, we do want to warn or let the public or the person on the other end of the interaction be aware that this is becoming somewhat of a problem and give them the opportunity to deflate. And if that deflation is not happening, then at some point in time, staff has to take the appropriate step to basically terminate that call. And staff needs to be known and being aware that they're protected under that particular situation because these interactions are in some cases recorded or will take the appropriate steps. And that's really important in terms of this user code of conduct. It's not just service levels of what we're doing to the public, but expectation that goes bi-directionally. Sorry, we're just going to the next slide. So in terms of the background of the service promise, in the quarter of 2023, in quarter one, Customer Experience Division was formalized. In Q2, existing service commitments were combined to create and refresh a citywide service promise and standards around that service promise. In Q3, we relaunched that internally. We worked with all of our stakeholders across the City of Toronto, refreshed the service promise, and we published internally to review it from Toronto staff, knowing that it's always a live document, a live policy that will be updated and adjusted accordingly based upon feedback and interactions. In Q4, continued staff consultation conducted citywide via the Service Promise Refresh Network to confirm and refine the document and standards. We wanted to make sure that before we actually launched it externally, we're comfortable internally with the ethos and the commitment around service. In terms of staff consultation, over 40 divisions provided feedback about the service promise around language and expectations. And 3 key themes emerged. One was support for greater internal consistency. Staff places a high value on having citywide standards along the desire to maintain room for operational readiness when necessary. That means not one size doesn't necessarily fit all, but a standard and expectation has to be attained. The second principle was the need for clear internal service wording. Staff has indicated a desire for wording to be better reflecting of the experience from staff to staff as well as the public, and make sure that counselor interactions were also included there as well. In terms of number 3, the importance of sustainment actions. This is a policy that's an ongoing cultural evolution in how we interact with the City of Toronto and with our residents. So in terms of sustainment, this is something that's to be committed to in 2023, 2024, 2025, and so forth. So there's requirements at the division head level to make sure that this is continuously communicated and supported in a meaningful way. In regards to what's different, so adjustments based upon feedback means greater clarity and consistency, adjusting language to apply across all audiences, strengthening the alignment around the public service bylaw, and response times aligned to more than 2 business days, 48 hours, for all interactions and channels. That doesn't necessarily mean in 48 hours the answer will be provided, but it does mean that within 48 hours they'll be responded to and knowing that we're working on the issue on your behalf. We also want to align with the recent updated email signature guidelines, as well as the hybrid work program as well. Just if we can go back for one quick second. What's also important is that in terms of guiding principles, we want to treat you fairly and with dignity and respect, internally and externally. That's going to be consistent. We want to make sure that the experience is simple and convenient as possible. We want to provide the choice and accessibility and flexibility where you want to be accessing those services. We want to make sure that we offer responsive and reliable services and protect privacy and personal information above anything. We also want to make sure that we're consistent in terms of managing our communications around voicemails, that when you do reach out to us or we reach out to you, there's a signature, a consistent signature that provides information and contact information. When we're out of the office, we want to make sure there's proper protocols and consistent protocols there. And then we also want to make sure that when someone's reaching out to us, and for example, we're not there, we have the appropriate backup with the appropriate contact information as well. And equally as important is to understand that when you do leave a voicemail or send us an email, that we'll do our best to respond within 48 hours to that particular issue. Next slide, please. So in terms of phased approach, what's really important is to crawl, walk, and run. In phase one, internal consultation that started in 2023, making sure that we're all aligned, each division, around these core principles, around professionalism, courtesy, and respect. Then we're moving to the walk phase, which is today, meeting with members of council to discuss the service promise, to start the dialogue around feedback and thought and perspectives, and then by Q4 going into next year, declare this to the public and make sure that everyone's aware of our commitment and continued commitment of growth and consistency around service excellence. In terms of next steps, we want to make sure that it's a division-led implementation and sustainment. We also want to share with members of council, and not just today, but ongoing, information sessions about the service promise and get your perspectives and thoughts. In terms of public implementation, we want to make sure that we also understand your thoughts and feedback from a public's perspective and get inputs on how we're providing the service. We want to publish the service promise and the service user code of conduct on the Toronto website and make sure that everyone's aware of that and visible. We also make sure that we can measure progress in a consistent, reasonable way. Work with division to explore opportunities, how to track this, measure it, and make sure that this is just beyond the policy. It's about our culture, behavior, and actions moving forward. In regards to implementation sustainment, this is just a quick diagram to show the commitment around communication, learning, recognition, and performance. And yes, with the work of the City Manager's Office and with Human Resources and with the Customer Experience Division, we'll do some things around updating communications, making sure the Toronto websites are updated, making FAQs available to our internal peoples, as well as integrating the service promise in terms of the City Manager's Award and making sure that it's celebrated and this becomes a cultural norm. And in terms of performance, exploring opportunities to progress management and with our divisions. What our division heads need to do as well, our colleagues, is update our divisional websites and communicate the importance of the service promise. Develop divisionally focused information that incorporates the service promise as well. And integrate the service promise into divisional recognition programs. And then use existing divisional tools to measure the understanding and adoption of these service promise principles as well. We're in this together, and this is a continuous long journey, but we're all committed to service excellence, consistency, and professionalism. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mr. York. It is now time for questions of staff. Are there any questions of staff? Okay, I'll ask a couple of brief ones. So, Mr. York, I want to make sure that we're all clear. I mean, this isn't new or radical. We had some bits and pieces of this before, or maybe more than bits and pieces, but this is a refresh, so we're coming back.
Through the chair, yep. This was actually launched in 2015. And this is just now a refresh and a refocus based upon coming out of COVID and making sure that we're all committed to service internally and externally.
Okay, and what I do note is that, along with a service promise, which is outward facing, there's also an inward facing piece, and that is just around the code of conduct. So, would it be fair to say that those two come together with balance? because as much as anything is in terms of policies, this is about human resource and this is about change management. So those work together.
Through the chair, very fair comment. It's about balance. It's about mutual respect. So we're, in terms of the code of conduct, it's also making sure that staff understand that their rights and humanity are protected, but so are the public's. And we expect each other to interact with each other in a fair, respectful way and be very clear about those expectations up front.
If someone said, hey, this is just an excuse to hang up the phone, if someone gets mad, is that fair? Is that true?
Through the chair, no, it's not. We are paid to manage through those interactions to the best that we can. So it's not about meeting the emotion where it is. It's about communicating the expectations, giving the opportunity to the person on the other line or side of the counter to calm down and to reflect and deflect. But if it continues, or if it escalates to a point where it becomes harmful or demeaning to the other person who's another human being, they have the right to make a professional decision.
Okay. And you're okay to come back in about a year and tell us how it's going?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you very much. Final check, no questions? Great. Members wishing to speak? Oh, okay, I will speak then. Guess I should run my clock. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. I have a motion. I'll just summarize. It's to come back in a year and let us know about how the implementation is going and what the feedback is. Before being elected to office, I was a member of the Ontario Public Service, and I remember implementing something, being part of the process to implement a change like this a number of years ago. And at first, I think people said, "Oh goodness, we got to update our voicemail every day. We have to change our email signature, and we've got the clock running when certain things happen, and people are going to check in on us to make sure it was happening." But I think people quickly realized a couple of things. First of all, the vast majority of people were doing this already, and likely actually exceeding what they are. But they did set a bit of a benchmark for others to compare themselves to. And secondly, it became a better office and a better workplace. And I mean that. At the beginning, it was this change management to go through, and then people really practiced this, and they were proud about it. And I just felt it made for a stronger public service, and most definitely interactions with each other, because in the workplace, it's a team, and we all work together, and we work together to get things done, and making sure that everyone's functioning in the same way and at a certain standard helps things to work. And then, of course, interacting with anyone outside the office, whether it's at a professional level with an external agency or an external stakeholder, or in a service capacity with a member of the public. So I'm really glad that this is being done. I hope everyone embraces this. I'm not sure that it's a radical change. For a few people it might be, but I think this is a big plus. So I'm really excited to see it here. You've got my full support on it. I hope if this committee can do anything to continue to help with this process rolling through, please come forward. And with that, I hope everyone will support my motion, because I think we should check in a year and see how it's going. And hopefully that'll be a great news story again in 1 year's time. So thank you. So on the amendment, we've got that ready? Yes. Yep. All those in favor? Any opposed? The amendment carries, and I believe it has to be item as amended. Yes. Yep. So item as amended, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Mr. York, don't go away. We'll go to the second item. Excuse me. No. There is a registered speaker. So we'll go to the registered speaker. Just let me call the item. It's SE 3.2311 Toronto, Framework for Reporting and Dashboards. I will welcome Ingrid Boudet. Good morning, Ingrid. I think this is welcome back to the Service Excellence Committee, although I think you might have been online last time, so happy you're here. Are you okay? You're all set up with your computer? Yep. Let me just do a reset here. So yeah, you know the committee process, and you ready to begin? Very good.
So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here again, Chair Holiday, committee, and CXD staff and city staff. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on framework for reporting and dashboards. So my name's Ingrid Boudet. If you don't know me, I'm the founder of No More Noise Toronto. I started this group to advocate for more acceptable, healthy sound 1,300 members. I take a data-centered approach by collecting crowdsourced information and also taking sound level measurements from people's homes. And we're collaborating with the city to find solutions to reduce urban noise. 311 is the front door to the city. So this is where most people are going to walk in and have most of their interactions with the city. You are the data collector and data keeper of all who visit, and you're also the first step in protecting our health when it comes to noise. And why do we need protection when it comes to noise? There's significant health impacts when it comes to noise. The list is on the left, and on the right you will see charts. And I deputed on Monday, it's been a busy week, to Toronto Public Health regarding healthy aging. And you can see the arrows for the percentage of people living with chronic conditions. Noise contributes to the top 3. Leading causes of hospitalization, noise contributes to the first one. And at the bottom, leading causes of death, ischemic heart disease is an outcome of noise. And in the bottom right, I have dementia and Alzheimer's disease in a box because that is part of the mental health outcomes of noise, including annoyance, depression, sleep disturbance, Alzheimer's disease, and loneliness. And Toronto's not the only city battling noise. It is actually a global problem. My Google alerts go off all the time regarding noise, whether it's fireworks or vehicles or whatever across the globe. So when people are trying to report noise right now, they're unsatisfied. And we were lucky enough to have Gary York came and we did a webinar together, and I asked people, what were your challenges reporting noise? And difficult, immediate action, no response, no support, accountability, discouraged from staff. So there's room for improvement here, and we are here to work with the city to do this. And so I'm thinking about the service promise, the presentation that we just had. That goes both ways. So this is a great opportunity. I used to work with a software called Workday. Salesforce is very similar. And so I understand how powerful this is. This is a game changer for me in many ways. So I worked with the vacation module. So I developed business processes that were able to pinpoint a whole bunch of things, and people look at vacation very carefully. So I needed to make sure that business process was right. And so here's an example of a noise business process. You could literally have a long list of noise types, time reported, time occurred, and then you can look whether it's allowed or not allowed, and assign priority, and then report to MLS or whatever department that requires, and it's MLS for noise. And through this software, there's often wizards that can guide people through the reporting process. So I'm really excited about this change because what is measured is also managed. You've all heard that before. And so we're talking about a framework for data. And if you want to look at highlight emerging trends, seasonal, cyclical, and geographic patterns, and proactively generate insights, you need to collect all the data. You need to collect noise reports from leaf blowers at 2 p.m. in the afternoon to know if it's a problem and if it's an increasing problem or not. And on that line, I looked back when I was doing my homework. On March 8th, there was a report, and it was about communicating, there was about service level standards. And that's something that people just don't know. When can they expect that their noise report is going to be resolved? And I noticed down in the fine print at the bottom, it says that service standards are not available for noise complaints. Data of resolution are not shared with 311 Salesforce system. I kind of understand that, but then if the complaint comes into Salesforce, how will the reporter understand what the status is of their report? And are there SLAs for noise? Many people are wondering, when am I going to get some sort of resolution? So I recommend you actually separate the noise workflow from the other workflows, including the workflow for moving vehicles. The image on the right is everything that MLS and bylaw violations has to deal with, which is a handful, but most of them are stationary, and most of them do not impact our health directly, like noise. So collect all noise reports at all times, create good business process, work with members of the public to find solutions, share the data through the open data portal, and finally, I see MLS here, reduce the number of noise reports through technology. So managing noise supports a whole bunch of city initiatives, and I just think we should create a better Toronto by reducing noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of the speaker? All right, I'll bite. I'll try.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, thank you for the presentation. Always interesting. being a West End councillor, I had to become very familiar quickly. But I wondered if you were familiar with the noise reporting system that the airport uses.
I have not dug into it because
Okay.
I've been focusing on municipal.
Fair enough.
Which is, yes.
Would you believe me if I said, along exactly what you were talking about today was what they use is the relationship between the noise complaint and the data points around it, when it happened, why it happened, and also where it happened, plotted on a map.
Yes.
And that map, would you believe me if I told you it could also be overlaid with the movement of aircraft?
Absolutely.
And would you believe me if I told you that they had actually microphones deployed in certain points? So they have an integrated system on managing a very specific element. But I just wondered if there's particular types of noise you think should be on the top of the list of things that could be tackled with this, knowing that there's certain things that happen in the city that are going to be a lot harder, right? So categories that really bug people that you think we should put our eyes on first, knowing that this is maybe something a bit more mature, but something that we can aspire to.
Thank you so much for that question. I appreciate it. One of the biggest complaints about noise that I get is motor vehicles, which is moving motor vehicles. So that's not MLS. I fully understand that. And I'm thankful to be having conversations with Toronto Police Services on that. And we are actually working together to find locations for vehicle inspections this summer. So I'm thankful for that as well. Other than when it comes to the noise that the city is responsible for, amplified sound is a very localized noise source that, it's kind of back to where somehow something happened during COVID and people lost that understanding that my actions impact somebody else. And so people tell me that if they talk to someone about turning down their outdoor speaker in their backyard, then what that person does is turn up the speaker and has it playing 24/7. There is this new shift to what I want to do, I should be able to do at all times. So amplified sound is a big one. Also construction. In my sound level readings, you can see where the floor level, where the sound level just really increases, and the number of noise spikes is really intense. So when I think about what's an efficient way to tackle that, relying on people to report noise means there's a problem already. So let's try and solve it by actually, I think area sound level monitoring would be a way to look at having. Basically, they sit on top of the light post, and it monitors the sound levels, and that can be broadcast back to MLS so that they can understand if a report comes in to 311, they can look, and there's a live feed of, is that area louder or not? Is the person just being cranky? That kind of thing. So I think through technology, we can manage amplified sound a lot better, construction noise a lot better. And that would be also a wise resource allocation tool.
Great, thank you. Thanks again for joining us. That was my question. I'll just check any other questions. Seeing none, appreciate you joining us.
Thank
Are
you.
there any other speakers on this particular item? Seeing none, I'll welcome you back, Mr. York, to the presentation stand, and you begin as soon as you're ready.
Thanks again for the opportunity to meet with this particular committee and to share the progress on dashboards. What's really important is that we're not in this, alone. It takes a community or a village to raise a product or initiative like this. And we have our colleagues again from the integrated divisions to talk about the dashboard. And what's really exciting is that our commitment was to come back to this committee to share the progress of the dashboard and to talk about what to expect in Q3 of this particular year. So this is just a manual representation of what will be there. You can see, for example, in this particular situation, you can filter by ward, by month, by division, by request type. And eventually we'll be able to go through all 600 request types, but what's going to be ready by Q3 of this year are the top 10s by ward. You'll be able to see the trends and nuances by month, the type of service requests. For example, in this particular situation, I think it's MLS that's there. And you can see what's in progress, what's new, what's canceled. You can look at, for example, the top 10 service type, such as injured wildlife, zoning violations, other picking up of cadavers, maintenance violations, amplified sound, which we just discussed, wrong, waste set-outs, stray at large, animal noise, illegal dumping, and injured domestic. So those are just the trends on that particular area of the top 10 that are happening. You could look at overall from the City of Toronto or ward specifically. What's also that's going to be very exciting is to be able to see the performance of those particular activities against the service level. So in those top 10 categories, we know that the service catalog that we've communicated in the last meeting that we had the service request type, the service category description, as well as the SLA. In this report, you'll be able to see the performance of that SLA against that particular categorization as well. And once again, it'll be manual right now in the creation of this particular dashboard. It'll be something that's sent out to all members of council on a monthly basis to look at the trends and nuances with an understanding that we will digitize this and automate this going into 2025. At this point in time, we have a prototype that'll be ready to be demoed in Q3 and then sent to your attention and generated from CXD on a monthly basis to your particular office. What we want to do is just demonstrate the types that'll be there in terms of the categories and what have you. What's here again is MLS, for example. Then we also have work from transportation that could show some experience or information as well. And once again, you can look at the service requests per year, the types, the overall monthly trends and nuances as well. So this is going to be something that's very exciting and brand new. What this represents is the end-to-end service delivery, not just the front end that's going into 311, but also what's happening in the wards in terms of delivery of service against the top 10 areas of activities that are being identified by the members of public. So it's extremely exciting, and this will be ready for the councilor's attention and to review in Q3 of this particular year. I want to have the opportunity to share that with you and then answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'll check with members of the committee. Are there any questions about these? Councillor Ainsley.
Sorry about these in particular, or just?
The whole report.
Okay. So Gary, first off, I wanted to ask about the deputant that we just heard. She was mentioning the disconnect between 311 and I guess municipal licensing around the service standard. She had the slide deck where she said there's a gap there, the service standard's not reported?
Through the chair, there are service standards that will be reported through this mechanism moving forward. In certain cases, there are certain categories that do not have a service standard because we're just collecting information at this time. This is just a new initiative because of the concerns that the public has vocalized to the City of Toronto. So some of those examples that through Carlton and team are collecting that information, which is net new. It's never happened before within the City of Toronto. Then we've developed certain action plans and service levels to appropriately address that moving forward through this particular committee and through our ISD, Integrated Service Division committees and mechanisms as well.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about in terms of this dashboard where it talks about like the top 10 issues, and I think I've raised this with you before, and so when it comes to graffiti in my ward, if it's on a Rogers box or a Bell box, and I'm driving down the street and I want to file a complaint, I go to 311's app, there's no way to do it, and I have to email 311, and then more often than not, 311 staff say, well, who owns the box? Well, I have no idea. there's no signage on it. And then they will say to me, well, you need to contact Rogers or Bell. And I have no idea. And, you know, it's not reflective in this chart that I'm trying to have graffiti dealt with in my ward. And as a resident that sees something like that, instead of going to the 311 app where it should be seamless, I think they're just probably throwing up their hands, or they call my office and ask me to deal with it. So is there anyone, can this be added to the 311 apps and then we deal with it at our end instead of turning around and saying to a resident, you know, thanks for contacting 311, but this is your problem, call this number. Or try calling these numbers and you can figure out whether it's Rogers or Bell.
Through the chair, so we are in the business of service. We want to make things easier for the public to communicate back into the city of Toronto. So we are working with our colleagues on creating a more seamless service experience through parks. And we are looking at scoping that work out right now. And we'll have that scope done by the end of this quarter, so we're almost there. And then we'll be able to communicate what will be accepted in the first phase of that integration and the subsequent phases. So if you just give us a bit more time, I'll be able to communicate that accurately in terms of what will be covered within integration within 311 and parks moving forward.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll check any other members with questions. Nope, thanks, Councillor Perks. I'm going to ask a couple if that's okay. I just want to go back to noise because I hear a lot about it, and lo and behold, 2 of the bar charts in there refer to noise. And that shouldn't be a surprise, right? These are the type of things we hear about. But 311 is integrated with some of the city divisions at this point in time. But is it true that the committee has given direction to integrate with more? And so, you know, is it fair to say that MLS is not fully integrated?
Through the chair, there's opportunities for further integrations that we're looking through, be it noise complaints and what have you, or also complaints and compliments, and doing that in a phased approach.
Right.
It's also the state of readiness, but we are working with MLS and other divisions on a roadmap where you will see these integrations done in a yearly, thoughtful, methodical way based upon volumes and public feedback.
Right, and so what I'm getting at is fair to say it's a process, right? We can't expect it to be tomorrow, but there's work that has been asked to be done to do that. And conversations like this help inform that roadmap because clearly there's an interest from the public on things like noise. Is that fair?
Through the chair, absolutely, very fair.
And I'll turn to Mr. Grant. Is it fair to say we shouldn't leave anyone with the impression that we aren't thinking about data that comes in regarding noise? I think there might even be a map around somewhere where this stuff is tracked. So there's opportunity in this process, but it's not that it isn't being done at this point.
Thanks for the question. It's really important to note and that we do work closely with Ingrid and her team and with Gary and his team and our own data team to build mapping to know where things are happening. A lot of the discussion has been about noise types that we didn't record with 311 before because they were permitted to happen within the hours of 7 to 7, so we didn't take that information in. We are now working together to take that information to have broader data to make better decisions on where things are happening and the type of noise that is impacting our community. So again, these are all positive steps with the review of the noise bylaw, the improvements to the noise bylaw, and then improvements with 311 and improvements with our stakeholder collaboration and engagement.
Do you think it's fair to say, though, that the way that the 311 call intake system and the categorization of noise is not the same as describing what your program is? Because MLS has, a noise enforcement program, and it's defined and set up in a certain way. And so they aren't exactly the same thing, but one could inform the other.
That's correct. Our noise team follows a priority response model. And I always reiterate at these committees and others that we are not resourced as immediate responders. So we are within a day, or we are within 5 days, or we are within 10 days. The challenge is managing the expectation of the person making the call to 311 that there is noise next door to me, and we are not going to get out there in 1 day or 5 day or 10 day. So that is the challenge in meeting the expectation of the public that we're going to resolve that noise complaint. What we do is use data and mapping to determine that every Saturday at 11 o'clock at location X, Y, or Z, that we would go there the following Saturday and at that time, and we would monitor and test that and do our work that way. We need to use our resources. We have 31 bylaw officers that do this work. It's a large team, which is important, but we receive 17,000 complaints per year related to noise. We've received 5,000 in the first 5 months. So we're tracking for that number to increase. Ingrid, the deputant, accurately stated that construction and amplified sound are two of the highest areas, as well as moving vehicles. Moving vehicles, again, is us working with the police. But amplified sound and construction are areas that we can target through mapping and monitoring, that we know where it's happening, and repeated complaints tell us where we should be focusing our efforts.
Thank you, and thank you for those numbers. So would you agree with me that there's a distinction here that's important in that the dashboard may teach us, council, staff, the public, interesting things about what people call about and pressure points. But there's a difference between seeing the pressure point and suddenly looking to the program area and saying, well, close the gap, versus, well, maybe a conversation needs to be had about resourcing and program design, and that really happens around budget time. So, if priorities come through this, then the job of council is to figure out, is this something as a city we want to act on? And in doing so, look to the public service to develop a program.
The short answer is yes. The longer answer, and to quote the deputant, what gets measured gets managed. The term I use, or the similar quote, is what gets measured gets done. And it is important that we measure what we're doing, but I also have to put caution out there that this is just one piece of the story. It's going to identify areas of concern, areas of pressure, and it doesn't mean that we're not looking at ways to solve these. And that's really where I want to manage the expectations of the public and of counselors, that we are looking into this. We have been working on this diligently. We have done a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of study on this. We are working at it actively, and our numbers, our performance numbers are excellent. They're in the 80s and 90s. But noise still exists in our city, and it's going to continue to exist as our population grows.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I'll do one final check to see if there's any other questions. Okay, second round. Councillor
Thank
Ainsley,
you,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. Just looking at the slide deck, Gary, I just wanted to ask on the sample slide decks you provided, the last one is on the second level, meets service standards, TBD December 2023. So when this slide deck is live, there'll be like a service standard there that, like potholes, for example, they have to be filled within 5 days of being filed with 311, or what do you mean by service standard?
Through the chair, really good question. So that number will be populated with that service standard and the achievement of the percentage of that standard. So, for example, it's 5 days. You want to make sure that you understand what that catalog entails. And then you also want to see how we've performed as a city or division against said category. So you'll have that synopsis for each of the top 10 within Q3 of this year. So you'll be able to see that. The challenge right now is it'll be a manual report that's there. So there will be a lag in data of about 30 days.
30 days?
Yeah, about 30 days for the time being. So it'll be 1 month behind. Now, we'll do our best to rectify that. But in 2025, there might be a lag of 2 hours. So you'll have real-time information once we digitize this and automate this to your attention going in 2025. The next step after that is to make it accessible to the public. But the first is to make sure that members of council and our stakeholders have access to this, understand the trends and nuances, the service levels, and then that information will be made accessible to the public.
Okay. And sorry, 30 days because our staff are still paper reporting, or it takes that long to get from point A to point B through multiple people, or?
It is a bit of a complex. We're pulling from multiple locations and what have you. It's a bit of a manual calculation as well. So I'm using 30 days as a buffer. Hopefully by the time we get out, it's much shorter than 30 days, but right now it stands, it'll be about 30 to 15 days at a worst case scenario in terms of the lag of information. It'll still be relative. You'll still be able to see the trends and nuances. There'll just be a bit of lag in terms of that information for the fourth quarter of this year. Going into 2025, it'll be real-time information.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. One final check. No other questions? Great to speak.
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you, Gary.
I'll take a moment to speak because I have a motion. So thank you. My motion again is rather straightforward, but thank you, Mr. York, for the presentation and for bringing the dashboard. I'm just going to suggest some future opportunities of things you can continue to develop. So they would be adding some multi-year data, including looking at stuff pre-COVID, the ability to choose more than one ward or maybe community council districts, or the ability to compare them, perhaps some predictive trends, which I think you're working on here, or normal or target lines on the graphs, relative performance against service standards. So not only are we either achieving it or not, but how close are we? And in particular, if we're doing really well and overachieving it, we should say that. And finally, we live in a changing city, and at some point, ward boundaries will change, and service standards might change. So if we can just think about how to integrate those into the charts over time so that the analytics continues to be relevant, that would be my suggestion, and I'll leave it to you to think those through as you continue to develop the product. Just generally speaking, the simplest thing I would say is if you've ever been into a hospital and you go to someone that might be in the intensive care, they've got machines and things hooked up to them, but they take vital statistics and they measure the patient. I'm not saying that we're measuring a patient, but the idea is the people that are in charge of the care of that patient are thinking about those things, and they're watching how the person was, how they are now, and how they might be, and they chart it all out. And that's kind of an everyday simple example, but I took one of the reports out of the TTC that we see every month, and Councillor Ainsley will know these, and I just randomly took one, the on-time performance of streetcar. And it tells us a lot. It tells us where we're at today. It tells us how we've been doing in the previous months of the year. It also graphs the trends over the previous years, and it shows me, 1, 2, 3, 4 years back. And those lines they're not straight, they're curved. And sometimes the pattern matches, sometimes it doesn't. And then finally, there's a line across the top that says this is the target, so this is where we want to be. And as someone that sits on the board and is accountable to the public, as is the service, this is a great tool to explain to people how things are doing in one look, but also to the board to think about what's happening, right? What are the emerging trends? What do we have to talk about? Why has this changed? And that's the essence of the conversation. I think this stuff is really exciting. I know maybe some people don't. I think what you showed us today is really exciting because it prompts conversations, really important conversations about where we were, where we're at, and where we're going. And that is the essence of the work that we do as members of council, but also the essence of what the public looks at to keep us accountable and keep the public service accountable. So having this information out there, and I realize we have to crawl, walk, and then run, but this is the evolution of something really important and really exciting. And if I recall, I don't know that many other cities are doing this. And I think that's really neat, right? And maybe some are, but this is Toronto, and this is our solution. So I want to express my appreciation on this. I hope this is something that helps members of council. And then finally, the really important piece is if we are counselors, council, and the public service, and we're thinking about and we're learning from this what's important to the public, because that's what they're interacting with us about often, and what is going well and what maybe isn't going well, then we really need to think about that when that comes around to budget time. And we have to make choices, and maybe we decide that that's not the focus, or maybe we do decide that's the focus, but prompting that very conversation is critical. And this is a very, very helpful way to set the foundation for those conversations. And, you know, I would love to see a day where, you know, we go into budget consultations with the public, and the first, you know, starting piece are graphs like this to say, you know, this is what has happened over the last year, and this is where we think the pressures are. So great work to the staff, great work to everyone that's participating in this, and, you know, I hope to see it continue. Final check if there's anyone else that wanted to say something. Nope. Great. Well, then on the amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And on the item as amended, all in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. And that is the last item of this meeting. So Councillor Ainsley says it's motion to adjourn. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.